Uglydolls. In the modern age of collectible toy brands, Uglydolls is known to be the underdog toy story. The tale of the unusual plushies that became a pop culture sensation. Created by Sun Min Kim and David Horvath, it originally began as a cute little thing between the couple where David would draw her some doodles and Sun Min would make dolls out of them. But then one unintentional pitch later, these simple yet charming looking monsters appeared to the public and grew into an entire Uglyverse, as they call it. Now the toys have become a worldwide phenomenon that expanded to games, clothing, a variety of merchandise, and of course, their own movie. Which does seem to be a good time to do so for the brand, since films like the Lego Movie and Trolls are making a trend out of features based on a popular toy franchise. But now that the dolls are about to get ugly on the big screen, is there a hidden beauty within this film that's waiting to be discovered? Or is this review also gonna get ugly? Let's find out. The story. The whole point of the movie is not necessarily to tell a story, but rather to convey a message to the audience about embracing your ugliness. That the things that make you unique are your best traits, and to love your curves and all your edges, all your perfect imperfections. A message that it tries very hard to express throughout the movie that it does so to a fault. Some could even say that this movie can be interpreted as 90 minutes of hammering the moral down non-stop to force audiences in believing that this film has good intentions. While it is true that the message itself is good, what makes it a serious problem is the way that this movie is executed. Not just by the means of handling the message itself, but how the entire feature is structured. You'll see more what I mean as the review continues, but for now, the message already looks bad in the type of story that it finds itself in. But what is the story in the first place? Well, it's about this girl who knows that there's more to life than in the little town that she lives in, so she and a bunch of her friends head out and explore to see if there's a bigger world out there, and that maybe what the girl believes in turns out to be true. Now, how many times have you heard of that plotline before? In fact, since this was directed by Kelly Asbury, didn't he already direct this story before in Smurfs: The Lost Village?
Wake up, Moxie!
I've always believed the big world is real. I know I'll find the perfect kid for me. Oh, guys, what if this is the way to the big world?
If there really are other Smurfs out there, we need to find them.
What if this means the Lost Village isn't a legend?
Whoa.
Now you're talking about maps and mystery Smurfs.
What's going on in here?
The biggest issue with the movie is the complete lack of originality. That it offers barely anything new or tries some unique things and become completely dependent on predictable tropes and tiresome cliches in order to advance the plot. Even on the aspects one would think it would have room for creatively, they end up feeling like they mainly copied it from others. That's especially the case on the concepts of how this world functions, where many, like the doll's purpose, were taken directly from Toy Story. Of course, there would also be humor to try to integrate some fun for the kids, but it's very rare that it ever landed a joke to have it be even somewhat funny. While watching the movie, as it tries to enforce their message again and again, it made me wonder, why should I listen to this film when it tells me to love how I'm unique and different when the story itself is anything but? The animation. Regardless of what people might think of this movie, it's hard to deny that the animation is well done. It does deliver a colorful world that stays true to the aesthetic of the toys that this film is based on. At the very least, it does have one thing that it did right. When entering Uglyville, it brings out an environment that's more rounded, playful, and colors bursting everywhere, while the residents and characters are like the toys as these simple, misshapen creatures full of life. It is a big contrast to the Institute of Perfection, where everything is meant to show purity by being mostly white, calculated, angular, and everyone looking nearly identical in order for the environment to achieve perfection. Or at least, what it thinks is perfection. Of course, Uglyville is a place that's a lot more enjoyable to look at than the Institute, which is a little shame that the film spends most of its time at the latter. However, that won't stop itself from making the most out of the materials it has. What could be the most standout moments visually have to be the musical numbers, where they either make the most out of their environments or break the realms of their own reality in order to have the scene act like a full-on music video.
Show 'em who you are, show 'em that you're strong, show 'em they've been seeing you all wrong.
I also want to give credit to the textures that really sell on the idea that this is a world of living toys and the characters are all stuffed with fluff. But there is one big catch to all this. Sure, the animators made the most out of creating an Uglydolls movie, but like with the story, there's just something about it that feels recycled. That the concepts visually were also influenced by other films. In fact, what the animation tries to do bears a striking resemblance to the 2016 DreamWorks film Trolls. Think about it. The positive look of the heroes and the way they convey the opposite for the villains, the rounded designs, the strong use of color and all sorts of materials for the textures, even other elements like the plot structure and the musical tone was borrowed heavily from Trolls. Again, the artists have done the most they could here. The only problem is that it's hard to appreciate the efforts when the intentions were to imitate someone else. If there is one nice thing I could say about the movie, is that I guess the animation does look good. The characters. When a movie wants to tell its audience that being ugly is beautiful, it would need ugly characters to show it. While the film does feature a whole bunch of imperfect characters, they also come with a lot of imperfections in all the wrong ways, resulting them to becoming dull, unoriginal, and in some cases, kinda pointless and poorly handled. In Uglyville, there's Moxie, who is the optimistic believer that knows that there is more to life than in her little place, and wants to go out to be a part of something better. Yeah, that's nice, girl. You and many other protagonists in animated kids films, get in line! Along with her are her friends who actually have little purpose other than to be the comic reliefs. Ugly Dog is Moxie's best friend that's also a suave charmer, Lucky Bat occasionally gives advice, Babbo is the big ugly doll with a lot of things in his pockets, and Wage is the sassy one that Wanda Sykes usually plays in movies. On the perfection side, there is Lou, the blue-eyed blonde leader of the Institute that demands everything to be as perfect as him, including his people, and if he finds one piece of imperfection or anything that doesn't follow his agenda, then he will do anything to destroy it. I feel like there's a political commentary somewhere, I just can't put my finger on it.
And you're here to try to earn your ticket there. Better listen now or you haven't got a prayer.
Anyways, back on to the guy. He's the villain that serves as the big obstacle for our heroes. The movie does try to give him a backstory with the help of Ox, the mayor of Uglyville, but it falls flat since it comes out of nowhere and adds little significance to the plot. As for the other perfection dolls, it's safe to say that they are far from perfect as characters, like the Spy Girls are just Valley Girl comic reliefs, and Mandy is the one who actually helps the Ugly Dolls, since she is insensitive about her own flaws with the fact that she needs glasses. Unfortunately, there's very little to look highly upon regarding the characters. Even the voice acting feels just decent at most and not all that memorable. With the exception of Nick Jonas, whom I will admit has significantly improved since his cringy Disney Channel days. The movie does deliver plenty of ugly characters, but their ugliness is definitely not a good thing. The songs. While I have already made the comparisons to DreamWorks Trolls, the one thing that I'll give Uglydolls that it does more than Trolls is that it does have a list of original songs instead of mostly being a jukebox musical. While that may be a plus for the movie, the songs themselves, however, are not great or even memorable. Normally when I talk about musical numbers in movies, I like to separate them in terms of what purpose they serve to distinct them from one another. In this case though, it's really hard to do so because they all sound the same. They're all radio-friendly pop tunes that are meant to pump up the beat and bring out a positive vibe to listeners that the whole family can dance to. They can have a small connection to what's going on in the story, but for the most part, they try to be their own thing. The biggest problem with the songs, and something that also damages the movie as a whole, is the way that they all feel very artificial. It's painfully obvious that the purpose of these songs is not to either help advance the movie or to deliver a positive message. Their function is purely for profit, to hope that one of them end up becoming the next Happy or Can't Stop the Feeling. If the film itself doesn't sell, then hopefully something could come out of the soundtrack. It's no accident that they brought on board people like Pitbull, Nick Jonas, Janelle Monáe, and Kelly Clarkson to the cast. These executives want both the movie and the songs to be big hits. This is not to say that the songs are terrible or even unbearable. It's just that they sound like every other pop song out there and end up giving the movie a soulless feel. The songs are meant to help highlight the message, but they end up putting out the wrong one that says shamelessly, "Buy our products." Uglydolls is possibly the most hypocritical animated feature ever created. A movie that tries to promote embracing one's uniqueness and say that one's flaws can also function as their strength. And yet it does so by copying other animated films in order to entirely build itself, resulting in a completely dull and unoriginal movie with a predictable story, stale characters, bad jokes, and a set of bland pop songs. Maybe some substance can be found in the animation, but it doesn't hide its prominent intention that it was created not as a labor of love by passionate artists, but rather a factory-manufactured product with no soul that is only meant to sell merchandise. If I do have to recommend this movie, it would only be towards little kids, and I mean like 6 and under, because the best purpose of this movie is to be a kid distractor so that the children can watch the funny characters and the pretty colors. The true hypocrisy of Uglydolls is that it tells its audience that it's good to be different, but the movie itself tries to be like every other generic animated film out there, and that is why I have to give this the AniMat's seal of garbage. How ironic that this movie should have followed its own advice.
He means well, of course, though he can be a bit judgmental.
You think?